Ireland, Spain and Norway have announced they'll recognise a Palestinian state next week, in a move that will further strain relations between Europe and Israel. Now, Israel has, of course, denounced this decision, insisting that this is a reward for terrorism. Joining us is political analyst Professor Joseph Siracusa. Joe, thank you for joining us. Will the Australian government likely follow suit?
Hello, Gabriella. No, I don't think so. I mean, the Australian government will try to show a little independence from the United States, perhaps, but it's not going to be talking about full-scale diplomatic relations. I mean, Palestine has an observer status at the United Nations, and Australian diplomacy tends to be very cautious. It likes to get involved in everything, but not too far ahead of anything.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong has finally responded to the ICC seeking warrants for Israel's Prime Minister over alleged war crimes. Penny Wong says whether or not warrants are issued will be a matter for the court. Is it a weak response?
Well, very cautious indeed. I mean, not a very useful response. I mean, the Americans aren't buying it, nor some of America's great friends. Look, I think the ICC charging Netanyahu and his defense minister with crimes like this is a very serious business, very dramatic. Wouldn't have hurt the Australian government to say this is a good idea or a bad idea. I mean, the ICC charges individuals. The International Court of Justice charges countries. Now, they've been accused of, they're going to be charged, or even if they're not going to be charged, that's what they're asking. The prosecutor's asking for right now. What the prosecutor is saying is that Israel deprived people of food and water, electricity, and ordered the killing of civilians and this kind of thing. Very serious crimes. Whether or not the arrest warrants go through, Netanyahu will spend the rest of his life as an outlaw, as well as his defense minister. So, I think it would behoove Penny Wong, who's a very smart observer of the foreign world. I mean, it wouldn't hurt her to add a little more to her thing than Albanese did. The prime minister said he didn't want to talk about things under litigation. Well, that's a bit of a squib, isn't it? I mean, you got to say something.
Yeah, well, we heard the President of the United States responding. Why couldn't our Prime Minister?
I think the Prime Minister of Australia has just a little less at stake here than President Biden. I mean, Biden, after all, is in lockstep with Israel. He's provided Israel with everything it needs, and that, as Senator Lindsey Graham said yesterday in the Senate, it's just a matter of time before the ICC comes after the United States. Now, a couple of years ago, when Trump was in power, the ICC went after some Americans for killing people in Afghanistan, or something like that, and the President Trump ordered sanctions against the ICC. Biden, when he got in, he reversed these sanctions, and here we go back to the sanctions again. So, the problem is not the message, it's the messenger. So the United States is going to push back on this. And keep in mind, China doesn't belong to the International Criminal Court, nor does Russia. A whole lot of people don't belong to it because, Gabriella, this is the day they fear, is when somebody comes to your door and issues an arrest warrant, and you have to go to Holland or to the Netherlands to be tried like a common criminal. It's not a good look, whether you're right or wrong or who's on your side or not. You try to avoid that day. So, the great powers and even the middle powers don't want to get tied up in this. On the other hand, 124 nations in the world are committed to arresting Netanyahu if the arrest warrant is issued, wherever he is. It's the same way that, I think in 2023, Vladimir Putin has an arrest warrant against him. So, these guys are going to be outlaws for the rest of their lives. It's a pity it's come to this, but, if you're going to pay homage to international law, once in a while, international law hits you in the face, and so you got to respond somehow. And the Americans responded by sort of screaming and jumping up and down. The Australian response is much more muted. I have a hunch there's a great deal of debate, Gabriella, within the Australian cabinet about how to respond to this. I'm sure there's some people who think it's a very bad idea, such a muted response, and some people who want to say even less. So I'm sure there's stuff going on in the background.
Of course, of course. Let's talk about Iran. This week, Iran's president and foreign minister died in a helicopter crash. Now, the incident occurred near Iran's northern border with Azerbaijan. Joe, this creates political vacuum, and how will it really amplify tensions in the Middle East?
Well, look, if I were a war planner in the Pentagon or a war planner in Israel, I'd say, well, this is the opportunity we've been looking for. There is a power vacuum in Iran. The president, of course, is the heir apparent to the Ayatollah's job. And the foreign minister is, of course, responsible for Hamas, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq and Syria, and, of course, Hezbollah. I mean, this particular foreign minister who died was bankrolling all the bad guys in the Middle East. So there'll be this vacuum. And, of course, half of the Iranian population can't stand the Ayatollah anyway. I mean, there'd be no grieving or no lamenting of the loss of these people. Now, when this happened, I was listening very carefully to the Iranian response, and they kept saying, well, don't worry, the country will go on as usual. And Iran's not like the New York Yankees, Gabriella, where if you get hurt, next man up. It doesn't work that way. These guys take years and years to get in these power positions. And so there'd be a struggle for power about who runs the place and about their foreign policy. So it's an important moment for Iran. And, of course, the United States and Israel would like to take advantage of this. And why wouldn't they? I mean, these guys, Iran's running the show in the Middle East. So I'm sure there are people in Washington, particularly John Bolton, jumping up and down saying this is the time to strike Iran while they're weak. There'll be people in Israel who reckon that the only way to make everything go away, to make all the bad press go away, is to attack Iran at the source of the struggle. And of course, Iran's the head of the snake, and so there's a great deal of incentive for Netanyahu to pick a fight with Iran right now, because that would take a lot of the heat off of him and unite the Israeli people. So, it's a very tense moment. And I think the idea of these arrest warrants and the Iranian leadership dying on the same day, I think they're connected. I mean, there's something incredibly karmic about this.
I want to move on to the US election. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley has revealed that she will be voting for Donald Trump in her first public comment since ending her Republican White House campaign. Joe, do you expect that her supporters will follow her?
No, I don't. Her supporters were true believers, Gabriella. They were going to work for her. They gave her money in the hopes that she would keep Donald Trump away from the office. Her saying that she would vote for Trump is really shorthand for her. I'd like to run for president again one day, so don't hold it against me. So, she's just sort of preparing the way. Look, this idea of getting endorsements, in the 1920s and 30s, when labor unions and mayors and corrupt city bosses used to deliver large votes to candidates, it was a big deal. But today, to get the endorsement of somebody, it's not such a big deal, because you don't know who's who's actually going to follow suit. Americans like to vote independently. It's the same thing in Australia. You can't tell Australians what to do. You can't buy these American delegates. I mean, they have to make their own decisions. So I think it's a little bit of theater on her part. On the other hand, Donald Trump has got to take all the good news he can get, because most of the news around him is bad.
So Donald Trump and Joe Biden will be going head-to-head in a televised debate next month. What about RFK Jr.? How's his campaign going?
Well, it's going pretty well from what I can tell. He's still trying to get on the ballot in all 50 states. Now, the reason, Gabriella, that candidates spend millions and millions of dollars is for name recognition, okay? When Robert Kennedy Jr. Is running for president and you see his name on the ballot, you don't have to ask yourself anything. He's Robert Kennedy's son. Everyone knows what he stands for. That is, he stands for an independent run for the White House, and I think he's going to get a lot of votes. And a lot of mainstream in America say that he's going to take votes away from Trump as well as from Biden. I don't believe a word of that. Nobody who's going to vote for Robert Kennedy Jr. was going to vote for Trump anyway. So I think he's going to take the votes from Biden. Now, with the troubles that President Biden is having with his progressive left, with these these arrest warrants and things like that. His support has collapsed everywhere. And so Robert Kennedy Jr.'s run for the White House, I think, is the final nail in the president's political coffin.
Former US President Donald Trump and Melania attended their son Barron's graduation in West Palm Beach, Florida. The 18-year-old ceremony was a proud moment for the parents as they cheered from the stands, but also Donald Trump has revealed that, well, he says it's very cute that his youngest child, Barron Trump, has joined his older siblings and officially entered politics. At just 18 years old, Barron Trump is set to make his political debut as a Florida delegate to the Republican National Convention in July. Joe, what do you make of this, of Barron entering politics?
Well, being a delegate, of course, is sort of like a freebie ticket to go to the convention in Milwaukee, and they tend to be captain's choices. You know, all these delegates, they're not exactly an election for them. They're the appointee of mayors and senators and recommendations of congressmen and the like. Now, he will be there. The fact that he will be there, I think, is very interesting because Trump has done a great deal in the last couple of years to insulate his son from politics, from the rough and tumble of politics, and to allow him to be sent to the convention to cast a vote, I think is very interesting. I don't think Barron Trump's son has a big future in politics. You know, he reminds me a little bit of Henry Ford's grandson, Edsel, which was the biggest, lemon the Ford motor industry ever built, was the Edsel. You know, it looks good. Few people might have bought it in the beginning, but, you know, at the end of it, doesn't have a lot of cachet. I think Donald Trump is not the beginning of a dynasty. I think Donald Trump is a sort of an aberration. He was a very interesting character who came along at a very interesting time. And keep in mind, your viewers should keep in mind, if Donald Trump wins the election, he's already a lame duck. That is, he's only entitled to one more term of office. He is constricted or constrained by the American Constitution. He could serve it in jail, of course, but he can't run more than once. So in a sense, when he enters office, people who deal with him and just might try to buy time to get rid of him again. So the American presidential process has turned out to be a year-round sort of festival. And I think the president's kids in this is very, but, you know, I would have looked for his daughters, you know, and they seem to have a little more political clout than Barron does. But Barron doesn't strike me as a natural in American politics. I think it's interesting. It's good to see that his kid wants to get involved in his father's career, but I'm not holding out much of a future for him.
Let's listen now to what Donald Trump had to say.
To me, that's very cute because he's a very young guy and he's graduating from high school this year. He's a very good student, very smart. And I think that's great. I think it's very interesting, too. But he's pretty young, I will say. He's 17. But if they can do that, I'm all for it. I think I'm all for it. And he probably would be, knowing him, he would probably be for it, too.
Joe, before I let you go, what do you make of that? It's probably too early to say whether or not Barron Trump, will be the next, well, not obviously the next, but will be the president one day.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've had a nice long life with some really interesting children. And that conversation suggests to me that Melania had the last say here. I think, listening to that, you get the impression that Trump would like him to stay away. But I think Melania said the kid's going to the conference whether you like it or not. So Trump sort of danced around the decision. But I think Melania was all in on that one.